On Overdrive this week, we take the 2014 Range Rover Sport out for a spin on Indian roads. Auto selector with Bert, we meet some real heroes of the historic Le Mans endurance race. Hello and welcome to Overdrive, your weekly dose of high-octane action. I'm Shireen Bha. Now, a few months back, you saw Bert in the UK doing some pretty crazy stuff with a new Range Rover Sport. He was impressed by the new iteration, and of course, it was the petrol supercharged engine that got him up in racing. But in India, the more popular choice will be the diesel version. So here's Jamshed's verdict on the diesel Range Rover Sport.
When the Range Rover Sport was launched in 2005, enthusiasts of the Range Rover badge questioned the authenticity of the SUV's christening. Why was it called the Sport, and why was it badged as a Range Rover when it was based on the Discovery's heavy platform? Well, that didn't stop it from becoming extremely popular even amongst notable celebrities. But with this recently launched second generation, has the Sport really become a Range Rover? It is a big claim, and fortunately, we have an entire day to find out exactly that. The 2014 iteration of the Range Rover Sport most certainly has a sense of occasion of a Range Rover. Its dimensions are quite close to a Range Rover's, which by itself is a huge SUV. But evidently, it also has a lot of styling cues from the Evoque, which according to me is one of the best looking SUVs in the world. And this makes it seem compact and belies its size. The large fascia with a Vogish headlamp unit taken from the Range Rover, the downward raking roofline, even the false vents on the hood most definitely are an indication of its sporty pretense. The result is that the Sport is probably the best looking member of the Range Rover family. Even with its increased dimensions over the previous generation, it has managed to shed about 500 kilos thanks to an all-aluminium construction borrowed straight from the Range Rover. It even gets a badge to signify this extensive use of aluminium, which I think is a nice touch. If I had to sum up the looks of the Range Rover Sport in a phrase, it'd have to be sophisticated athleticism. The Sport's interiors have been dialed down a bit from its elder brother. That said, it is still one of the most special cabins I've been in. One thing about Land Rover is that they know how to do interiors. There is less clutter from the switchgear, and this allows the lines to flow neatly through the confluence of warm leather and cold metal. The Sport now also gets a panoramic sunroof, which has resonated well with their customers. The round dial gear knob has been replaced with a gear stick, which is a welcome change, and it gets paddle shifters true to the Sport's badge. The space in both rows is extremely generous and much better than the previous generation thanks to the extended wheelbase. Although India does not get a third row of seating, which makes way for a generous boot. The Range Rover Sport has more equipment than you know what to do with. It gets JLR's magical dual screen feature, which shows different visuals to the driver and the co-passenger on the same screen, which is quite a fancy gimmick. But the most useful feature for India is the different camera views, which will be a blessing while parking this huge SUV in tight spots. A 360-degree view gives you your distance to other cars and the curbs. You can also adjust the ride height with a press of a button. But now let me get to the engine options, and today I'm driving the HD V6 variant, which has a 3-litre V6 diesel unit.
If someone didn't tell you you're driving a diesel, you probably wouldn't be able to tell in the first run. This 3-litre V6 is that refined. For obvious reasons, it's going to be the popular engine choice for India. It's a decent performer. It's got about 292 PS of max power, which might not sound much, especially when it's moving this mammoth 2.3-ton mass. The fact of the matter is, it's extremely responsive, it's drivable, thanks to this 8-speed automatic gearbox largely. And for your usual urban commutes or your occasional highway sprints, this engine option should do just fine.
The diesel, of course, is aimed at efficiency and the ease of driving, so it'll probably be the appropriate choice for those of you employing chauffeurs. For drivers, Don't worry, because Land Rover has a 5-litre supercharged petrol V8 just for you, which of course needs no introduction. The last times I drove this engine was in Jaguar's very own Beauty and the Beast, the F-Type and the XKRS, and it blew me away. The Range Rover Sport with the supercharged petrol then is the fastest Land Rover ever made, but just firepower alone won't earn it the Sport badge. It also needs to move like an athlete.
It would be foolish to expect this massive SUV to transform into and behave like a sports car just because of a sports moniker. It still weighs about 2.3 tons, has a very high center of gravity, and just the sheer momentum it carries makes it a very difficult one for the handling department. You can't really defy the laws of physics now, can you? But what Land Rover has done rather well is that they've made the suspension and the chassis quite adaptive. Now this all-aluminium chassis borrowed from the Range Rover is far superior to the Discovery's twin-rail chassis, so the body roll isn't entirely absent, but it feels a bit controlled. The steering is light, very responsive, and the only thing that you might complain about is that it is just a little bit too light and listless. If you put it into the sports mode, it will weigh up, and you can also opt for this dynamic on-road package that is on offer that will open up your world to wonderful technologies like torque vectoring, which you usually see on sports cars. All this together makes this car handle rather well for this massive size.
What the Sport definitely scores high on is the ride quality. The adaptive suspension, though stiffer than the Range Rover, makes it glide over just about everything. What also helps the ride quality is the 19-inch high-profile tires on offer instead of the 21-inch ones that are offered in other markets. There are no rattles or clatters, only soft thuds as the cabin gently glides over craters and undulations alike. This is the one attribute that makes it worthy of a Range Rover badge more than anything else. And then some for the off-roading enthusiast.
The Sport doesn't get Range Rover's Terrain Response 2 system as standard. What you do get is a Terrain Response 1 system, so you have all these electronic off-roading modes. You have grass, gravel, snow, you have mud rot, you have sand. But beneath all these electronics lies a Torsen central differential and a full-time all-wheel drive system. Now it doesn't get a low ratio transfer case, but I think in our day-to-day real-world off-roading hurdles, this system is just adequate. But if you're of the school of thought that believes that part of the Range Rover authenticity lies in its ability to go off the road and truly off the road, then you can purchase the off-road pack with the Terrain Response 2 system as an optional extra. So you have all these electronic modes, but what it also does is automatically it gauges the terrain, it adjusts the suspension, the traction control, the differential and even the ratios, so you can indulge in some proper luxury off-roading without a bother.
You've already seen the Range Rover Sport do some pretty amazing things. It's climbed rocks, steep slippery slopes, even an aircraft. It's waded through some astonishing depths, tackled slaloms and high-speed runs and emerged like a victorious gladiator. If you had doubts about how sporty the Sport really is, ponder over this. It holds the record for the fastest climb by a production SUV at the infamous Pikes Peak Hill Climb and does its dynamics test at the notorious Nordschleife track. And today we've tested it in India in real-world conditions, so you'd expect the verdict to be just as dramatic.
It's quite simple actually. You overlook the significance of nomenclature, and the Range Rover Sport is no longer just a footballer's toy. It is a serious, imposing SUV, and it's every bit a Range Rover. Now what Land Rover have cleverly done is they've retained all the important bits from the Range Rover, brought it extremely close, and then made the Sport an affordable option. Now if you are nutty enough to take this 1 crore SUV off the road, or even do some high-speed driving for that matter, you can still opt for the optional extras which will serve your purpose in entirety. But this step down from the real Rangy is still quantums better than most luxury SUVs in the world.
Well, if you're dreaming about the Range Rover but falling about ₹1 crore or so short, then the new Range Rover Sport should be the thing for you. On that note, it's time for us to take a break. When we return, we answer your queries on Auto Selector and we bring you Porsche's legendary Le Mans cars.